Planning Commission for Wednesday, May 11th, 2022. I'm going to open the meeting at 7:30 p.m. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Fitzer? Mr. Hara?
Ahoy!
Mr. Cusero?
Here.
Mr. Nushai?
Here.
Ms. Redmond? Mr. Sanaki?
Present.
Mr. Tinlin?
Here.
Mr. Watson? Mr. Yell? Do we have quorum, Chair?
We have quorum. We have 5. Agenda item number 4 is approval of this agenda. I see nothing to change on it. Any changes on this? Seeing none, we don't have to vote on that. We just approve that verbally. Agenda item number 5 is approval of the regular meeting minutes from April 26th, 2022. I would entertain a motion to...
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from April 26, 2022.
Second.
I have a motion and support. Any changes, corrections? Anybody see anything they didn't like? All good. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Mr. Sanaki?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will close public discussion, and we'll move on to, excuse me, agenda number 7, discussion of the capital improvement plan. And I think, Joel, you're going to walk us through this? Or? Oh, okay. Mr. Roker, thank you.
Yes, sir. So good evening, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners. Last time I was before you, April 12th, for the CIP public hearing. So due to budget workshop challenges, and we respectfully requested that you move to today's meeting for your first meeting in May. So thank you, which is why we're here today. And as a quick recap from the April 12th meeting, it was a mutual understanding that Givels Webster and myself would return today and update you on the changes only within the CIP plan. That was largely due to ensure that it synced up what I'm going to ask you to respectfully approve tonight, so that it would sync up with what is actually going to be in the budget for this year. And that was, there's 5 capital improvement plans, or 5 capital improvement projects that are in the budget for council's consideration. The document that was before you last time had 1 or 2, actually 3. It was the North Washington Broadacre reconstruction, along with the water main replacement, and then it was also the female locker room. So the Broadacre one was for the water mains and the roads, and then the locker room was the third one. So we have 5 in there now, with the addition of Selfridge Phillips and with Red Roof reconstruction. So those 2 were not reflective in the plan last time, and then there were some other commentaries that we included in the corrections. So what happened was, in both the list and the detail of the individual projects, those dates were synchronized so that they are synced up with the actual budget for this year. Again, both in the list and so anything that was 22, 23 that wasn't what I just mentioned was pushed to 23, 24 for the time being. So that allowed me to have the synchronization I was looking for. We also then, on page 19, there was a request for a greater explanation to the following pages. We then removed projects that were excluded on pages 16 and 17, and then the project request sheets are now an appendix for your consideration.
If I could interrupt, I'm sorry, just
Sure.
Which version are you referencing for the pages? There have been a couple of versions.
I know. Unfortunately, I don't. The most.
Okay, that's what I'm looking at. So, okay, thank you.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, there was some confusion going back and forth as far as the edits were concerned, but I was being exceptionally diligent to make sure the years reflected, especially for this year's budget. In closing, I'd like to thank the commission for their patience. The CIP process has been new for all of us, and it hasn't necessarily been the most pretty or painless endeavor. However, I think that the city is going to be much better off for it moving forward. This process next year will be much more well planned out and executed in a more timely fashion. So your approval of the CIP is one of the final requirements necessary for the city to be certified as a redevelopment ready community through the MEDC. So those are the changes since the last time I met with you. So
Very good. Thank you. Any questions?
So the three primary projects that you talked about that will be requiring funds from the general budget are what again?
So there's Washington and Broadacre, that's reconstruction, and also a water main upgrade and a water main addition. So that's 2 projects. Then there's Selfridge, Phillips road reconstruction, Red Ruth road reconstruction, and the female locker room.
Okay.
If these go on, if we okay it and it goes on to mayor and council, then they approve, does that work get done this year then, or
So,
not necessarily?
So we've been pretty nimble with how things are developing as far as with what's going on in the local economy, as far as material availability and service provision, and also with the fact that we are pretty competitive for 2 federal grants that will offset costs by roughly $1.5 million. So Selfridge Phillips will occur. Construction should be complete in September, and the other 2 projects will commence early spring, but will be completed within this fiscal year.
Good. Yeah, I'm sure the residents will appreciate that.
That's what I'm hoping for, sir.
Yep.
So
Anything else?
I just have a procedural question. Was there something I was supposed to open and review in preparation for this meeting? Because it says discussion of a capital improvement plan. There was no link, no nothing to what we were going to discuss and how we were going to review it. So maybe I missed something in the process.
Good evening. There were a couple of emails. We apologize again for sending multiple emails, but there were links in each one of those emails that contained the draft that we were talking about, version 18. So, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little confusing, but, we did get a,
And the emails were sent out,
They were sent out last Friday.
okay.
But I would echo your statement. I think this is just a theme of the times where, here's a link, or did you check your bulletin board, or I was in a grad school class and it was incumbent on me to go fetch what I was supposed to digest, where up to that point in my life, someone would send me a paper bill if they wanted money from me, or someone would send me a check if they wanted to pay me for something. And so maybe, is it possible maybe in future years to just send the actual attachment?
Well, we do, typically when we have an agenda packet, we'll send you the agenda itself, and then links to all of the documents that are contained in there. That's just been our process for the last at least 2 years. Because typically we have more than one item on the agenda. So to avoid cluttering your email with 6 attachments, for example, that might include your minutes, your agenda, any plan reviews, any plans that are included in there, any other documents, that's very cumbersome to have to, did I open all of the emails or the attachments that were included in here? So for simplicity, we have everything linked in that. So in this case, fortunately, it's not something that you hadn't ever seen. It wasn't a brand-new document for you. And again, I think the city manager outlined what those changes were pretty succinctly.
And Jill,
Yes.
if I may, so the original packet was sent out on Friday, and then there was another one a couple hours later sent, and then on Monday, Joe did send just the updated CIP, the most recent at 1:30. So for this meeting, technically both of those were submitted. So there was the regular memo and link, which has been done previously, and then the CIP was also sent as a separate attachment in a different email. So there were a couple of different ways you could have accessed this document.
Thank you, Nick. And again, those changes between those different versions were not tremendous. They were, just making sure we had the right number in the right place, clarifying a word choice here and there. So,
Okay, I guess in the past, my trigger has been that the link was in the agenda. And then I knew, blah,
Sure.
blah, 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 here's a link, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
here's a, so that would be one thing that's a little bit different.
Absolutely.
Then the other thing I have is just a general question. Is this process and the way that the city of Clawson did this CIP presentation, is that mandated to follow that format?
well,
Because I would have expected something entirely different in terms of what you were bringing to the planning commission.
well, I know that you weren't here on the first presentation that we had at the CIP. I don't believe you were here for that, which was in March, I think.
Could
So
have
the
been.
first time, but you'll remember that, and I know you were we had a training for this back in September. We talked about it with the planning commission a couple of times. We explained what the process was going to be. So in large part, and you'll remember that the capital improvement plan is something that this Michigan Planning Enabling Act has tasked the planning commission to take care of, primarily for reasons of you are responsible for creating the master plans for the city. So you are the sort of the big picture. Your role as planning commissioners is to connect the dots to ensure that any public improvements or projects that are identified in the master plan are included in the capital improvement plan. Our process on the staff side was to assemble all of the department heads and people responsible for implementation of capital projects and have them really start to think long-term about what the capital projects are going to be over the next 6 years. It's not set in stone, as we talked about. It's really an exercise in planning ahead and saying, okay, we think we're going to need these things. We think this is going to be how much it's going to cost, and we think this is where we're going to get the money from. The challenge then is to say, as we move forward, where are we going to get this money? So the city manager talked about some grant funding that was available. When we think about grant funding, we also need to think about what are the city's matching funds? What are our obligations to attach to that? And let's make sure that we've planned, for example, in 2024, if we think we're going to get a grant, is there an associated match with that? Let's plan for that and note it in the plan. So that's sort of big picture. I think it's helpful to know that, we've got these 5 projects this year, and then we've got these things that are going to be projecting ahead. But next year when we start this process, later this year when we start the process again for next year, those items might change. There may be new priorities that arise through the process. There may be new funding opportunities, or there may be more expenses associated with some projects and some shifting around that needs to happen. So that's what you see next year will likely note, here's what you saw last year, here's how things have changed. So I think as we go forward, it's going to be a really interesting process for you to all see how this evolves. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I still wouldn't do it this way.
I will
And-
promise you, sir, that it will be much more streamlined next year. I'll make it much more timely, much more succinct, and much more straightforward.
Well, I guess what I would have expected, and I don't know, because when we were here and we went through all the details with all your department heads, to me, it was more like a line-by-line budget review, which I am not prepared to do, and I don't think that this team should have been doing what they were doing at that point. It's not line by line. I would have expected something like one of the big objectives of the city of Clawson is public safety. And under that is the police department, the fire department, and the DPW. And so what are they doing to do public safety, and outline the big projects and say, how does that fit into what the planning commission is doing with the master plan? If we had known that we were going to develop something that required more infrastructure like water mains and sewers, then I would think that that would be part of the master plan. I don't see what we did over this project to be fruitful and appropriate, and I was very uncomfortable. I'm still very uncomfortable with this because I think it was more a budgetary process and it wasn't long-term. You know, long-term in public safety, I would expect to have said, the fire department has 2 ladder trucks that are 20 years old and their life is 25 years, so we have to plan
That is
in 5
actually what
years.
we've done. And that's
But I
included
don't-
in the DPW section. We do have a discussion about dump trucks and other vehicles and how they have a certain life expectancy. And so you'll see that in the narrative. Now, next year, we can add more information to that narrative to make it more descriptive and more, maybe more holistic to see how they all relate to each other. And I think that's a great suggestion. We tried to do that. Again, noting with respect to the timing, we did start this back in the fall, but it's the first time we've done it. So we had some just getting people on board, getting people educated and learning what this process was all about. And I think it's gone as well as it could be for the first time. And I think just kudos to staff because they've really done a tremendous job with this, so. And to you for being on board and sticking with it despite your maybe hesitation for it.
To your point, though, Commissioner Cernaki,
Here, I'll let you-
your master plan does have 8 goals and roughly 2 to 5 objectives under each one. And to give it further finesse and fidelity, next year, we should be able to plug those capital improvement projects and directly say how this supports. And I think that's really the intent of this going to the planning commission and also to your point, but we just didn't get to that level of finesse and demonstration. But I think it goes without saying that these road projects will contribute, which I think is goal number 3, to the enhancement of the, Clawson neighborhoods, to paraphrase that goal.
No,
So,
certainly. I would just say that sometimes when new things come up, if you do it right the first time, you're good to go. If you do it wrong the first time, and then people are entrenched in that, you're going to do it wrong. So I was just saying that I don't think that in the next term that we should be, as a planning commission, entertaining line-by-line budgets and what costs here. We should be big picture. Is it appropriate to spend this amount of money for roads at this point in time when, and in our city, this is kind of different because there's not anything big to do that's going to happen. It might have been different when the Westgate was put in or something like that, where they turned a bunch of small, different buildings into a more cohesive project or things like that. So I'm certain that the city and the department heads are doing what they're supposed to do. I just don't think that it was very appropriate to get into a lot of the minutia details. We should have been much more higher level and dealing with larger buckets of funds that maybe when it gets down into the budgetary area, you take that and you disseminate it how it's most appropriate in that particular budget year. So,
Commissioner, I 100% agree with you, and I can promise you that this process will be much more refined next year.
good, thanks. Thanks for entertaining my discussion.
Yeah, if I could add, I think when I first took the role here on Planning Commission, I identified my concerns that the master plan really didn't emphasize the infrastructure. I think as a resident here, the infrastructure is like the number one thing I want to see fixed. The roads and the sewers and the water mains, exactly what you've focused on here and prioritized. So having nothing to do with any specific language in the master plan that you're talking about, big picture, like is this funding and is this spending, I should say, in harmony with the master plan's objectives? And would we as a planning commission say to city council, yes, absolutely, like all of this money has to do with making our infrastructure better, and infrastructure is part of our master plan, for example. Yes, don't care if it was $10 or $30, not my purview, but in principle, we're spending the money where the master plan says we prioritize our growth. So I think you've done what we would have hoped you'd have done, regardless of it. My only criticism or critique or suggestion, more of a suggestion in the future, as I look through the project worksheets, just the proposals, I think I brought this up a couple times before. I think there's opportunity to build a little more excellence into it. So I didn't see big changes in the numbers. Not that this is my job to say it should be 100,000 instead of 200,000, but generally, if there's evidence of a lot of care taken into those requests, like, I think most of them, if not all of them, are preliminary estimates, right? It could have been that these are quoted items. We have 2 suppliers offering to do this work, and here's the one that we chose. Maybe it was the cheapest, maybe it wasn't for these reasons or whatever. We put a lot of thought into it, right? And here it is, right? Versus, literally, it's an option, ballpark guesstimate, God knows who came up with this number and how it will result in a good project in the end or not. I trust you guys. I trust the people that did it, but if possible, next year
I know exactly what you're saying.
could be a little bit better. I think it would show a lot of excellence and build confidence. So, but that's all I had to say on that. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions or comments? Are you looking for a motion to approve this and send on to mayor and council?
Exactly.
I'd accept the motion to that effect.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve the CIP as presented today on May 11th, 2022,
And send it on to mayor and council.
and send it out to mayor and council for their discretion.
Support?
Support?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Tinlin,
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Mr. Cusero,
Yes,
Mr. Hara.
Yes.
Motion carries.
very good. Thank you all. Agenda item number 8 is other business. Do we have any other business? Oh, it's kind of a slow night tonight, isn't it? Is there not-
Last night I socialized with you the potential idea of doing an assessment of the planning commission based on the 2017 goals and objectives, just to identify what level of success or accomplishment the city has had on that plan. During my interview, I was looking at one of the assignments. The second interview was an assignment of the master plan. Pick a goal and why you think it would be important. Coincidentally, all 3 candidates, we picked neighborhoods, and I focused on infrastructure. And during the time of my review, I couldn't find anything that gave you any assessment as to where that plan was at. And so during my interview, I made a suggestion. It's a very easy way of kind of getting situational awareness of kind of like a stoplight indicator where, red is like nothing's happening, yellow there's progress, green is accomplished. You could actually throw in, orange in there, and that's a little bit better than nothing happening. So I would think that probably the majority of them are not green, and there's probably some healthy discussion and debate amongst this body that can decide whether or not, the goals and objectives are in some variation of red, yellow, red, orange, yellow, possibly green. So I just offer that up for your consideration.
Thank you. One question I have that you might be able to answer. I called Nick, or I emailed him a while back. You can't find our phone numbers any place on the city site anymore. It used to. You used to be able to find everybody's name on the planning commission, their cell number, and their home address. And I think that's all been taken down now. And I had a hard time even finding our city emails, even though it's just our name with City of Clawson. Is there a reason why that was erased, do you know?
Nick, if you know, I am not aware. I'd have to ask Nick, actually.
A couple months ago, that was discussed to not make those public. I was not involved in the decision why. So that's something we can definitely review internally now.
Do you know where that came from, the momentum to do that, to take it off?
The previous administration.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just wondered
Sure.
where it went. Anything else for other business?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say, we got a very well-written letter from a resident concerning her property's view of the Clawson School District changes planned, and I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to talk about this at council or if it's appropriate to bring up there. She had the unfortunate misconception that we had direction as planning commissioners over what took place on that school property, but I thought it was a real well-written letter, and if you would entertain it, I'd like to read it.
The one that was sent to Joan and then distributed on?
Yeah.
I've seen it myself. I've seen, yeah, if you want to read it into the
Yeah.
minutes, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Can't hurt.
Is that all right? Sure. I'll be quick, and I think it's going to be a short meeting. So, but I thought it echoed a lot of people's thoughts on the neighborhood. And so anyway, hello, Planning Commission. While I understand the desire to offer a variety of home options to draw in more families, I truly hope it doesn't come at the cost of the park across the street from me. I live on West Baker Avenue, directly across from where you're planning to build. I bought my home almost 13 years ago, and I still absolutely love it and the community. A huge factor in choosing this home was its location. I have a decent-sized corner lot without any obstructions or neighbors on the west side. I look out of my kitchen window and I'm able to see the baseball diamond and the cute little wooded area, along with beautiful sunsets when the sky is clear. Looking at the 3 proposed plans for the Baker site, is there any way you would consider keeping the development area from extending north of Baker? Keep the residential area only where the elementary school currently exists and leave the baseball diamond, trees, behind the DPW and green space as they are currently. Yes, we have the city park a few blocks away, but the joy this specific area gives me and others nearby is irreplaceable. Now that the weather is warming up, there have already been dozens of kids and families at the field, some learning their basic ball skills and others practicing with future games in mind. Personally, this takes me back to when my parents coached me and my younger brother's Little League teams, and it always makes me smile. The space needs to remain as it is. It is a place where kite flying is done, flag football games are played, kids learn to ride bikes on the grassy area, picnickers enjoy the sunshine, dogs are walked, snowmen are made in the winter, and let's not forget about the fantastic Clawson fireworks. That's a prime viewing spot for so many people. Of course, that was all based on emotion, which I hope you understand is a significant piece of the puzzle. However, what about the infrastructure that would be required to accommodate additional residential developments? I will not pretend to be an expert in this. We are all very aware of the flooding issues Clawson and the surrounding areas have. The great flood of 2014 gifted me with 2.5 feet of wastewater in my basement. And since then, there have been more than a half dozen instances of black water backflow into my basement, thankfully not anywhere near 2014. What guarantees will be made that these new developments will not exacerbate the same problem? What could potentially help alleviate them? This development plan would remove 2 voting precincts. How will the voting precincts be reallocated? Selfishly, I did not purchase my home so that I could look out of the window into another home or another potential monstrosity that is going to eat up the skyline and green space. I fear that Clawson is going to turn into Royal Oak. It saddens me to see how often it seems to boil down to money and development being prioritized over the preservation of open space and greenery. I realize that I am just one homeowner, but doesn't the happiness of the current community members outweigh the 20 or 30 new people and families that you're trying to draw in? I love this little city, and I would hate for this development to be the thing that causes me to leave. Thank you for your time and consideration. Now, we're not here to argue what the purview of the Planning Commission is, and clearly the interim planning and zoning administrator did well to refer her to the superintendent of the school board. But I read this letter, and I really felt compelled that what her comments were bringing forth were relevant to the Planning Commission for so many ways, relative to our parks and the experience in Clawson, certainly our infrastructure. And it saddens me that she didn't realize that the Planning Commission didn't have any purview over that in this situation. I don't blame her for thinking that it did. I would, if I was a resident. It makes perfect sense to me that such a dramatic change in what I look out of the window would be completely beyond any influence of the planning commissioners. But as it happens, that dramatic change did in fact occur, and that school district was voted to be demolished and replaced at a $55 million charge with another one down the street. So it's a dramatic change, and I guess I would just tell her and all the residents listening that please be careful with your vote. Please be paying attention to the details of things that are going on, because there's a lot of ways things can progress in a way that you might not think. And really, every resident needs to be very cognizant of what is happening. And it's unfortunate. I don't particularly agree with it, but I think that we have limited options going forward with that property. It's not within our control. So I just want to thank her for writing that note and encouraging all of us. Certainly, I was inspired by it to take our role as planners and commissioners seriously, so that we can do better for her and other residents to really make by plan, by design, not accident, a really great experience for her and her family and future generations who are going to live here. So thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
I noticed quite a few people on Facebook get into this thing about, we have an empty, where the Pizza Hut went down, there's an empty lot up there, and people right away saying, let's build this, let's build that. They don't seem to understand it's privately owned property. The city can zone it, but it's up to whoever buys it what they're going to put on it. And the same as these schools. Once that property is sold, it's up to whoever's going to build on it. We can say what size buildings we would like, or we're not going to put condominiums or apartments in there in a residential neighborhood. But it's pretty much up to the builder, and the builder's probably going to buy what he thinks will sell, which in this case is probably not going to be real small houses. The bigger houses seem to be more popular nowadays, so I would assume that that's what's going to go in that direction. But that's still 2 years away from us. So. Anything else on?
Yeah, it's unusual for a school to be replaced with a casino. You know, the resident wouldn't be thinking that, right? And in this case, it's a residential area. But it's an unusual, I think, a very unusual circumstance. You know, for a Pizza Hut to go and a McDonald's to show up, no one would be surprised. You know, if the Pizza Hut was to go and a parking lot would be put in place, you might, you know, sort of wonder. But I was shocked when the school plans were drafted as they were, to be taking a space that was convenient for residents and their families to get their kids locally to school quickly and efficiently and safely. It was a shock that would be replaced so dramatically. But I agree. Yeah, there's really nothing we can do.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for other business? Let's move along to the planner's report.
I don't have much to add tonight, except to note that the Michigan Association of Planning is having their spring summit next week on the 18th of May in Lansing, and the topic this year is housing. So it'll be a full day of programming related to that topic. So I'll be moderating a session later in the afternoon, so I'll report back to you at our next meeting with information that I gleaned from that. And I think that is all that we had from the planner side. I know that Joan had sent along her building report, and she indicated that she was unable to make it tonight, but that was all the information that she had was what she sent, so that takes care of her item as well.
And the only thing I noticed in the building report, it seems to me, is that Dee Dee's that opened up on 14 Mile, their temporary certificate's going to be expiring here soon. We expected to, I expected to see them months ago in here.
We'll look into that, yeah.
Please keep putting it
Yep.
off. Or, okay.
Yep.
Anything on planners, staff report, and training opportunities? There's some added on to our emails. You see that in the end of it. There's a whole listing of things that you want to sign up for.
Actually, I just want to add one more thing if I can.
Sure.
To Mr. Sinaki's point earlier, if it becomes a couple of days before the planning commission meeting and you feel like, did I get all the information? Please just send us a note and say, hey, did I miss something? Or, hey, I got 3 emails. Can you please just send me the right thing that I'm supposed to look at? Just give us a shout and we'll make sure, because we want to make sure everybody's got what they need so that you're prepared for our meetings, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 11 is legal update, but I don't see an attorney here, so I don't think we have any legal update. If there's nothing else for comments or anything else, we can adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Support?
Motion support, roll call, please.
Mr. Harrow,
Yes.
Mr. Cusero,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin.
Yes.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.